I don't know how to say what I want to say with words. Movement gives me a medium to talk about subjects that I don't know how to talk about, and I think maybe that's even because they're too emotionally loaded. All of the works I create are inevitably incredibly personal to me, and I think that's why sometimes it is hard to share. You have to remember with choreography that it's art, and art is subjective, and that's how it's meant to be.
Phoebe Jewitt, you are a dancer, an award-winning choreographer, and the artistic director of PITT Company. With your creations, you address topics such as our social system and the world that surrounds us. Your works have inspired and resonated with international audiences. But before all of that, we were just two girls sharing the bar in ballet class. So I would like to go back to the beginning and ask you, what sparked your love of dance?
I think my love for dance probably started before I even have a memory. I know for a fact of a very embarrassing story that I will share with you now, of me as a 3 or 4-year-old dancing to the Spice Girls on top of a freezer for my father's work colleagues at a drinks event. So clearly I like to be on stage being looked at and dancing from a very young age. But I think my love for movement just came from a love for moving to music. My parents, for as long as I can remember, have always just put really cool music on at home. Any kind of music from all over the world, any genre. And we just had like dance parties. Like we would literally dance around, be foolish, have fun. And I think that's where it started. And I think that's where I still am with dance today.
So when did that transition from dancing at home to going into a dance studio and starting to actually learn proper dance?
I think I probably attended my first class when I was in school as part of the school curriculum or an after-school club, and I think I was probably 11 years old. I'm lying. I'm lying. I did ballet when I was 5, also as part of school, but just for about a year. Anyway, when I was about 11, I think it was something like a jazz class. And I just had a lot of fun. And then there was another after-school club, which was ballet, which I went to once a week with a friend. Very, very hobby. Like a very chilled ballet class, let's call it. And at about 12 or 13, the teacher kind of said to my mum, hey, maybe think about doing some more ballet with her because she's definitely got the energy and she could have the talent to make something out of it. At which point I kind of built up with the lessons, but still didn't do anything past 3 times a week. And when I was about 16 and I started the Swiss Matura, I went into the sport class, which meant that every afternoon I had the possibility of coming to Zurich and training mostly ballet every afternoon.
So you didn't always know this was going to be your career. When did that switch happen?
I think probably when I was about 15 or 16, I understood that it could be a prospect. But I always kind of had in the back of my mind that it didn't have to be. I think I was quite aware at a young age that it wasn't necessarily an easy profession to go into because I'd already experienced how behind I was technically. And I kind of knew that I might not make it in a sense because it's such a tough industry. But I knew that it was a dream. I knew that it was something I was at least going to try to do. And I was going to try my very best. So.
And you made it?
So I guess you can say so, yeah.
You're currently dancing with a company in Lucerne?
Yes.
What was that like to land that job?
Oh my gosh. So I first went into the company as an intern. And already that was like a huge step for me. I think as a student, especially in the ballet world, in the dance world, there's a lot of doubt in you the whole time. It's something that's kind of ingrained in us, to constantly strive for perfection and for being the best, the most flexible, the strongest, whatever. So I always doubted myself. And I think when I finally got that internship, I had some kind of validation or proof that I did actually have something to offer. And I think for my confidence, that was like a massive, massive boost. And then I had a fantastic year, but that year was when COVID first hit in March. And so we literally went home, and did like some video projects from home to try and keep something going within the group. And I got a call in April from the director offering me a job, at which point I had thought, okay, she's not going to be offering me a job. It's COVID. It's way too late. There are no jobs available in the company. I had totally made my peace with it. I had been on loads of auditions in the months beforehand. It was a real roller coaster. And then yeah, she offered me the job, and I was bowled over. I was in shock. I guess I couldn't quite believe it, because I'd totally been like, okay, fine. If it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be. I'll find my way some other way. I'll freelance for a few years and then maybe get into a company, maybe go a different direction. But yeah, it came at a perfect time.
And now you're not only dancing, you're also a successful choreographer. So a lot of people have heard this term, but what does it actually mean to work as a choreographer?
Yeah. So choreography is, I guess you could say, it's a lot of things, because as a choreographer, you work with an idea, and an idea that you want to share with an audience. And you don't only work on that idea in the form of having the idea, but you need to have the idea, go through all of the details, and then work on the execution. So you go from idea to concept to dramaturgy of the piece to the music to what the set and the costumes could potentially look like before you even work with a designer. And then you finally get to work with dancers, at which point you are mostly responsible for creating the composition and the movement for that dance piece.
So what inspires you when you're creating? What kind of stories do you like to tell?
I think I am mostly interested, or I'm always interested in human beings. It's always about our human connection, our relationships, how we function. It's a lot based on human emotion and how we are emotionally driven and how that affects the spaces around us. Yeah, I think I like to play with that, in a sense of bringing theatricality into the physicality of my work.
And I've noticed you enjoy also working not only with music and movement, but also with your voice. Where did that idea come from?
I have no idea. No, I for a long, long time, I've written poems, but they were always just a kind of a joke. Like, I'd WhatsApp my sister with a 4-line poem about how exhausted I was at the end of a day, or something silly like that. And a few years back, I made a piece, and we had created the whole piece. I had the music done, and I was like, oh, something's missing. And I was ill for like a week, and I literally could do nothing but sit with a pen and a piece of paper. And I wrote, I think it was something like a 10-page poem. And I ended up recording the poem, and I was like, let's just see. I'm going to put it into the sound design, and I'm going to see what it sounds like. So I did it. And that was the first time when I experienced the text with movement. And since then, it's just been something that helps me gather my thoughts into something more tangible. So with a creation, at some point now obviously nearer the beginning, so I can use the text, I'll just start writing. And I'll then take segments or bits that seem to work, and I'll record them, and I'll put them into the piece.
I'd be curious to know, when you have an idea for a story, where does the whole process begin? Do you have a piece of music that inspires you, or do you first have the story? How do you normally work?
I think it varies, definitely. I like to work with a certain theme. It'll always be something I'm trying to wrap my head around, and it will always be based on something relatively current, something maybe that's happening around the world, something that personally affected me, some event in my life that I'll be trying to tackle. But parallel to that, I'll always be listening to music, and I'll always inevitably kind of find my way into finding music or concepts for music that kind of fit together with that idea. Music is definitely a driving force in inspiration for me. I take a lot from the musicality and the rhythm, and I use that to really drive the movement. But it could be sometimes, I wouldn't say my primary inspiration is the music. It could also be an idea or a painting or a movie. Yeah.
And how do you then translate those ideas into movements?
So the way I create movement is very instantaneous, and I'd say very much from the gut. It's very impulse driven. So one thing I do is I just go into the studio on my own, and I make sure I'm on my own. And I put on whatever music it is that I'm working to, and I just play around. And sometimes I'll film it, sometimes I won't. But sometimes I'll be in the studio for a few hours doing this, just to try and understand what it is that I'm saying. And this has become quite a beneficial way for me to understand how whatever it is that I'm thinking and feeling is translated into movement. And when I'm in the studio with dancers, it's then very much an instantaneous production of movement. And some of those movements will be things that I've researched on my own, but some of them will also just happen in the moment kind of thing.
You're still quite a young choreographer. Do you remember the first time you were actually working with dancers and what that felt like? Were you nervous, or what was that like?
Well, the first time was when we created the Ave Maria film, which of course you were filming.
Yes.
And
so this was when you were in high school, you had to create a project.
Exactly. This was my final Matura high school project. And I decided to create a choreography with myself dancing in it and two friends from the ballet school. And I think I really didn't think twice. It was one of those things where I was just like, hey, let's do it. And thank goodness everyone involved said yes. And I just remember having so much fun bringing ideas from my head into life, seeing these things actually evolve, and realizing that I was maybe able to produce something that was purely an idea into something tangible. I think that was just such an amazing experience for me. I weirdly don't remember feeling nervous, although I'm sure I was when it was actually going on.
I didn't know that was your first choreography, and it turned out great. And it was actually, they showed it at the Zurich Opera in front of a huge audience.
So they did.
That's quite a good start.
Yeah.
So now when you work with dancers, I actually recently was talking to a colleague, and he said, hey, Nicole, you know a lot about dance. There's something I don't get. How do the dancers learn choreography? What happens? So could you maybe describe that process, what that looks like?
So that looks like the choreographer showing the steps, and the dancers will often be behind the choreographer and just going over the steps repeatedly until they have the right rhythm, and they have the right movement quality and the right sensation of movement. then obviously you'll put it to music if you haven't already. And from there, you'll build the structure and the composition of the piece. That's one way to do it in terms of learning steps. Of course, there are other ways where you'll have sections of a piece where the dancers are improvising or doing a structured improv, where you'll give them tasks and they'll move based on those tasks. They'll dance based on the information that you give them, but it will be slightly different every time.
Do you normally have a pretty clear vision of what you're looking for, or do you just let them kind of surprise you and take a little bit from each one?
I'd say I have a very clear vision, but I'm quite open-minded with how I approach something. There have been some experiences I've had where I've really thrown myself into the other end of the pool and told myself I'm going to let them improvise with next to zero information and see what happens. And there have been other times when I've given them every single step and every single count and every single bit of musicality. And what I love is kind of finding a middle point between those two places, where you'll have days when you'll go in and I'll do Phoebe, and I will want Phoebe from all of the dancers. And then other days, perhaps days when I'm slightly less inspired by what I can give myself. Other days where I'll say to the dancers, hey, this is the idea, this is what I want to work on, this is the emotion, this is the vibe. Can you help me get there? And those days can be really amazing because you discover how to bring your ideas and someone else's ideas together, and how you can be inspired by someone else. So yeah, I love doing both.
You're currently still in two different roles. You're a dancer and a choreographer. What is it like for you to switch between those two roles? Is that challenging in any way?
I think it does definitely have its challenges in terms of the fact that when you're a dancer or a choreographer, you do have a very different perspective on things. But at the same time, it does enable me to understand both perspectives, which is I think a really nice place to be in, because I've been able to learn a lot from choreographers as a dancer, and to see how their process works and to see how I react to their process. And then I've also been able to be on the other side and see how I lead the room affects the dancers in the other way. And I've kind of, for a few years now, been switching backwards and forwards. And it has been, I think, a very interesting way of learning both sides.
Yeah. Since you know both sides, what is something you wish dancers understood about choreographers, and vice versa? What do you wish choreographers understood about dancers?
Oh my gosh, so many things. No, I think that's a tough question, actually. Choreographers have a lot to do. And as a dancer, you're focusing on the dance, which is very important. And I think as a dancer, myself included, it's sometimes really hard to imagine all of the things that the choreographer has to imagine at that time. So the choreographer might just want to see something because of lighting, or might just want to see something because they're not quite sure where the dancers should be in the space. But from a perspective of the dancers, you might often feel like, yeah, but we've done this 100 times already. Surely we're doing it well enough for you. So it is it's hard. It's hard from both sides. But I think the way to mitigate that is a lot of communication between the two sides. I think that's the only way to really get there, and to also, as a choreographer, give the dancers constant feedback. So to tell them why are we doing something? How do you feel about this? Involve them in the process, and don't treat them like tools, which dancers, I think, often do feel like during a creation process, because they are the executioners. Yeah, it's definitely a two-way street of communication.
Now that you are a choreographer, do you still enjoy as a dancer being choreographed on, or do you get impatient and think, oh, I would do this step differently or create the piece differently?
I do still enjoy it. I think, of course, you'll always, once you get into a choreographer mindset, you do start to see movement from the outside rather than from the inside. And there's always like a thought in my head of, ah, that's an interesting way to do it, or would I do it like that? But I am also very aware that choreography is a completely subjective thing. And I really enjoy seeing how someone else would do it, because that person is not me. That person is them. And that's what makes them unique. And I really enjoy being part of that person's process and giving whatever I can to help them have their voice in what they do.
How would you describe your style of choreography?
My style is, so it's very much a fusion of a physicality and a theatricality. Those two things really go hand in hand for me. And movement language wise, I've been developing a movement language for some years now that I'm sure I'll continue to develop for forever. But it's based on a fusion of the human, very animalistic traits that we have and the socially adapted, socialized traits. So all of the idiosyncrasies of us humans, what makes us humans, the based on kind of gestures, expressions. Yeah, I love partnering. That's one thing that's my favorite thing as a dancer. I love to dance with someone, and I love creating on two people. I guess because I'm always trying to talk about how we relate to each other.
The choreography I've seen that you've created with two people, it doesn't look so easy. Sometimes people are being kind of thrown around. And so how do you come up with this? And how do the dancers you work with respond to maybe movements that they haven't performed before?
It's always a journey. So often I'll try doing something and say, oh, I'll kind of direct from the outside. Something like, oh, put your head here and grab his head and turn him around and jump on his back and then throw him off to the floor. And it's kind of like it's like a sequence of events. And that's how I quite like to work, especially with partnering. Or I'll get in there myself and I'll see what comes to me naturally, physically. And then a lot of the time I'll then say, okay, do the same, but speed it up. And then we'll speed it up again, and then we'll speed it up again. Which is quite a good tool for creating the atmosphere that I like to create in partnering.
Would you say these ideas come to you quite naturally?
Sometimes, yeah. I think I often have to really listen to my gut, and it's something I have to consciously do. So I'll start off with a duet, and I'll be like, do this, 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 and then I'll be stuck. And I'll literally have to blank my mind and maybe even, close my eyes for a second, and then the next movement will kind of come to me. And if it doesn't, the amazing thing is about dancers today that you can kind of say, okay, you're in this position right now. I'm not sure where we should go. I'm feeling a bit of a block. And they'll probably come up with something that will kind of give you the next transition into something else that you can do.
You don't only choreograph on other people, you're sometimes also dancing your own choreography. Does that make the process more challenging because you're doing two things at once? And if you're also dancing with other people, you can't always see what they're doing?
Definitely. Absolutely. It was never really something I consciously did. It was kind of something I did because I wanted an extra dancer in the piece, and obviously funding was non-existent. So I thought, okay, well then I'll put myself in. On one hand, very difficult because we ended up filming a lot of things and watching it back to see how it looked. But on the other hand, I'm able to feel the piece from the inside, and I'm able to understand the emotion. And if I'm able to understand the emotion, then generating movement comes really, really easily. And some of the times I've done this, or a lot of the times I've done it with quite close friends and people I know well as dancers. So it's been easy to dance with them, easy to have this conversation that you would have in movement. Yeah.
As a choreographer, I assume it can be challenging also when you have to pick people to dance and where to position them and who gets to be in the front and who stays at the back. Has that been difficult for you, especially also as a young and up-and-coming choreographer, to make those choices?
Yes and no. I think because I know what it's like as a dancer and I kind of understood that that's just part of it. And as a dancer, you'll work with one choreographer 1 month and you'll be at the front and you'll love it and you'll think it's amazing. And then the next month, someone else will come along with a totally different movement language that you just don't understand. And you'll be at the back. And that's something that you, especially in a company that does so many different kinds of repertoire, which we have in Lucerne, we're doing like 4 to 5 different pieces every season. You get used to it, and it becomes a natural part of the job, because no contemporary dancer could really be expected to execute every kind of movement style perfectly. I think for me, the important thing is to make sure that everyone, regardless of their role, feels included in the piece or included in the process, even if it's a smaller cast or it's double cast, that everyone feels like they have their place.
Earlier, I mentioned that you are the artistic director of PITT Company, which is your own company. When did you decide that you wanted to start your own thing, have your own company, be in control of the artistic decisions?
In terms of PITT, it was very spontaneous. So this was again during COVID. I didn't have anything to do, so I called up 2 friends of mine. I said, "Hey guys, do you want to come into the studio? It's free. Let's create something." We created a 10-minute trio, which ended up winning a competition in Copenhagen. It's called the Copenhagen International Choreography Competition in 2021. And at the same competition, we won 2 production awards. And these production awards, one was an invitation to prolong the piece, and the other was an invitation to tour to Taiwan. Amazing. But totally unexpected. Like, I created this piece just primarily having fun and wanting to see what I could do. So yeah, this production award, one of them especially, meant that I needed to make the piece longer. And to get through all of the bureaucratic side of that, I actually just needed a company, which is why I founded the company. It was a lot of like learn as you go paperwork kind of situation, but it was so much fun. And in my heart of hearts, I think I probably had been looking for something like that for a lot longer than I had realized. As a kid, I was always creating projects and like not business models, but like cultural events to invite my family to, things like that at home. And I think that is definitely part of me. A side that wants to lead and manage is very much in me. Yeah, so that's primarily why it happened. Yeah.
Earlier, you were saying that when you were in your teenage years, you weren't really sure if you were going to make it in the dance industry. If you could tell young Phoebe something, give her a piece of advice, what would that be?
Believe in yourself all the way. Believe in your instincts, and if you love it, keep doing it.
It's a great piece of advice, something we all have to remember.
It's a really hard one, and it's really hard when you're doubting yourself to such an extent to then believe in yourself. It's kind of like, yeah, okay, well, I don't. So what am I going to do about it? But that's when people around you come into play. And that's when someone who has supported you your whole life is going to say, hey, get your act together. Do it for a little while, go for it. And when time's up, and that's okay. But you've got to give it a little bit longer until you actually make the decision that that's enough. Yeah.
Do you think the dance industry makes it harder to believe in yourself compared to maybe other fields?
I think the dance industry is hard. Um, I think the dance industry itself is just hard because jobs are so limited. And I think there are so many teachers and directors out there who are so supportive and so caring for their students and for their dancers. But at the end of the day, there are the amount of jobs that there are, and that amount is not growing. It's getting smaller and smaller as funding budgets are getting cut. So, yes, I think there's always room for improvement in the dance industry, but also, unfortunately, so much is driven by finances. So it's a tough world. Yeah.
If you had a magic wand right now and you could change one thing, what would that be?
More funding for the arts.
You're a storyteller and you've chosen dance as your medium to tell stories. Why? You also enjoy writing poetry. Why is dance the perfect way for you to tell your stories?
I think I don't know how to say what I want to say with words. I think movement gives me a medium to talk about subjects that I don't know how to talk about. And I think maybe that's even because they're too emotionally loaded to talk about, that I find it easier to portray them through movement. The beautiful thing about movement is that it's a universal language, right? So I can talk to someone that doesn't speak the same language as me about the same thing. And I strive to also create movement that is universally accessible in some form.
Do you have a particular approach as to how you try to achieve that?
No, but I've more recently, say over the past 1 or 2 years, become much more aware of the dramaturgy of a piece. And it's something I'm very, very interested in. So how do you portray these ideas and these concepts? How do you get them across to the audience? I think often it's very, very subtle nuances that you can use, and I think it can be a combination of how movement is executed and how that movement goes together with maybe whatever the text is or the movement, the music. Again, I think it's an instinct. It's so instinctly driven with me. Yeah.
It's already so difficult to make it as a dancer. And perhaps I'm wrong, but I have the feeling that it might be even more difficult to make it as a choreographer because there are only so many companies you can work with. How has that been for you, this journey of getting opportunities to actually be creative and create on other companies as well?
I think every opportunity I get to create is a little gift, because it's an opportunity to meet a new group of artists and to sometimes briefly, but to get to know new people, to see who are these people and what stories are they carrying with them. And it's my job to kind of bring these individuals together and bring them into a universe that stems from me, from my gut. And it's always a new experience. And that's the amazing thing about choreographing, is that it's like painting a picture on a blank canvas, often with new tools. And then you'll have this finished product and you'll leave. You'll kind of leave the painting behind. You'll have a video of it maybe. And you'll have the experience that you carry with you. And then you'll take all of those things and you'll go to the next one. So it's very, very beautiful. But yeah, as you say, it's not easy at all. And I think especially starting out, a lot is based on connections. A lot is based on network. And And you just have to hope that there are enough people that want to see your work and hear your voice.
And how do you manage all of that while also being a dancer?
I think managing it whilst being a dancer has been really great for the first few years, because being a dancer has given me a backup in terms of a security net, a place to go to, a dance home that I could always go back to and feel safe. Also a place where my mental load was much lower, because I had experienced how high the mental load is and emotional load is as a choreographer. To go back to dancing and not have to have all of the ideas and have everything like in control, not that you have it in control, but have everything kind of in eyesight all the time. As a dancer, you don't necessarily have to have that. And it's always been nice to go back to that role of being told what to do. But now, yeah, that is coming to an end, and I'm very excited to see where that path takes me.
So you're leaving the dance company you're currently dancing with.
Yeah.
How does that feel?
Bittersweet. It's such a great company. There are a lot of great people, and I think that's definitely what I'm going to miss the most. I am going to miss performing on a regular basis. I think that's what I have always enjoyed most about dance anyway. But I'm now on a journey where I get to create my own worlds and focus on that, which is really, really exciting.
So what's next?
Next is in the summer, I'll work with the National Dance Company of Ireland. They were founded just 2 years ago, but it's really, really cool that they exist. And I'm going to work with them for 2 weeks. But it's just a workshop kind of thing, working with composers and with dancers and musicians live. And after that, I'll do a creation for Tanz Lucerne. And we will start the creation in September and premiere mid-October in Lucerne Theater.
Amazing.
Yeah.
What has it been like to work with composers? I mean, a choreographer wants to do his or her thing. The composer probably also has ideas. So how does that kind of blend together?
I think the important thing is, again, kind of a dialogue and finding a common ground with ideas, being open to what a composer might suggest, and then saying, this is great, I need something different here, for example. I think there's a lot to be said for working with different artists. There's only so many good ideas one person can generate, and it's definitely not everything. So I love having the opportunity to work with different people, because it opens my eyes into things that I would never have even thought about before.
When you create something, you can feel quite vulnerable sometimes as an artist. For example, I remember when I had to do my first film project in school, and then I actually showed the film in a movie theater, in a cinema, and had an audience there. The moment the film started, I wanted to disappear. I mean, I was not watching the film. I was sometimes trying to catch some reactions from the audience to see, oh, are they liking it or not? But I was just kind of like, okay, let me become invisible. What is that like for you when your piece is being performed? How do you feel when you're in the audience?
It's nerve-wracking. I think you put so much, or I feel like I put, with every project, I put so much, as much heart and soul as I can into it. And all of the works I create are inevitably incredibly personal to me. They're my own, essentially, little personal stories. Even though I'm not trying to tell a personal story, there are a lot of elements of each piece that are little bits of me. And I think that's why sometimes it is hard to share. But at the same time, I think you have to remember with choreography that it's art, and art is subjective, and that's how it's meant to be. And no one is ever going to stand in your shoes. They're always going to stand in their shoes and see your piece from their perspective. And I think the more you accept that, the more at ease you'll be with creating something unique to you, something special to you. Because at the end of the day, that's what art is. Otherwise, we wouldn't call it art.
Absolutely, yeah.
But it's hard to remember.
And since it is so subjective, how do you deal with the possibility of getting negative feedback? Do you prepare for that, or do you try to ignore it?
I don't think there's any way of preparing for it necessarily. I think the negative feedback is always going to be difficult. But again, I think if and when that happens, you have to somehow just say, okay, that's someone's opinion of what I did. And if you hear that and you think, oh, actually, they did just mention something that I also, in hindsight, did think about the project, then maybe it's worth thinking about. If someone else has pinpointed one thing that you were already thinking about as criticism of your own work, then it might potentially be interesting to reflect on that for a next creation, perhaps. If not, then you can take that as one opinion out of X opinions and see it for what it is.
If you could choose to choreograph on any company in the world tomorrow,
Gosh.
what would your dream job be?
Oh, I'd love to create for NDT or Gothenburg. Give me either of those any day. Dream come true.
You'll get there. I'm confident that you will.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, but I believe in you. I mean, you've already
Thank you.
done such an amazing job so far. And
Thank you.
as I've said a few times, you're so young, so you have a lot of time
Yes,
to get there.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, definitely.
From your career as a dancer, as a choreographer, artistic director, what is something you think any listener could take away from your experiences?
I think if you feel like doing something and you feel the time is right, go for it. If the circumstances more or less work out, and you have something that you just want to try, then there's really nothing stopping you. And you can try it in a small format, you can try it in a larger format, whatever you can do, just do it.
How do you know the time is right?
Gut feeling. Gut feeling. You'll know when you'll know. You'll know. Yeah.
And for young dancers who are maybe in a similar position that you were in, not really believing that they can make it, do you have a piece of advice for them?
I think a piece of concrete advice that really helped me, that someone gave to me some years back, was go into a studio and improvise alone and find out who you are as a dancer. Because as a dancer, especially as a student, you're told how to do all of the things, which is great because you need to learn the techniques and you need to learn different styles. But also there isn't always, as a young dancer, there isn't always so much room to discover how you uniquely move. And I think it's a very exciting process for a dancer to discover. And it can open a lot of creative doors.
Yeah, I think in ballet school, I never discovered how I uniquely move. I just followed the steps and the exercises.
Yeah,
and
of course.
that's it.
That's what we're taught to do. It's not till a much older age, usually in education, that they bring in improvisation classes and things like that, which is great. But at the end of the day, dance is about movement. And most of us as little kids were dancing around and moving or running around or whatever. And that is effectively our natural movement. And it's really fun and enlightening to go back to that and to stop caring so much about how something looks from the outside. Because I really believe dance comes from an emotion. And we all express our emotions in a slightly different way. So improvising with that is a really, really good way. It's also a good way to just understand how you're feeling sometimes. If you're having, I've had really rough days before, and I've kind of told myself to go into the studio and just do some improv, and it has actually helped. Weirdly, because you'd think, why on earth would someone want to dance when they're feeling like that? But it has.
Well, in a society where everyone cares about what others think and how they look, maybe we should all be improvising more. It would probably be healthy for us.
I think we should definitely be improvising more. Yeah, absolutely. Put on the music and have a dance, even if it's 2 minutes.
Well, on that note, thank you so much, Phoebe, for the conversation, for being here, for sharing your talent. I can't wait to see what you'll be creating in the future. And it's just been such a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure to talk.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing.